Hi, and welcome to the third part in our Pixel 2D tutorial series. In this part, we'll focus on creating a new level, importing some assets, using the tilemap editor, and testing out our new level. So, the first order of business is actually managing our content. If you created your project based on the Pixel 2D templates, this should be your content structure. What I suggest you do is right click here and create a new folder with the name of your project or game. Let's see. This seems like a suitable name. Now in this folder I suggest you create a number of subfolders and try to keep everything relatively tidy. So for now we'll create textures folder. This is where we'll be importing our sprite sheets. The next will be a tilemap folder, and so on. I'll be creating a few different folders, and I suggest you do the same. Now that out of the way, let's create a new level, shall we? So to do that, go to File, New Level. You can also press Ctrl N to do that, and a new level selection screen will appear. For our purposes, let's stick with empty level since we don't need anything else. And there you go, we have a completely empty level. Now before anything else, don't forget to save. You do this by pressing Ctrl S. And let's save the level in maps, or world 1. You can save it any name you want, but it doesn't matter. Great, now that we have world 1, let's add something in it. Unfortunately our game folder is empty, so let's fix that right now. The source files are included in the plugin since the 4th of August 2020. If you purchased the plugin before that, don't forget to update it using the first video in the series if you don't know how. For everybody else, you should just have them. So, to get access to the source files, now bear in mind you can use any source files you want. If you have your own custom graphics or whatnot, I suggest you use those, but for the purposes of this video, we'll just use the source files that are already included to the project. So, go to your engine, plugins, marketplace, and Pixel 2D folder, and you should find the template projects, and inside here should be the source files. Now extract it anywhere you like. I'm just gonna extract them here, and you should see a list of folders. They each contain backgrounds, animated enemies, characters, and whatnot. For now, let's access the tileset folder, and if you double click this, you'll see this is basically our tileset. It contains most of the assets we use to build our levels. Now, importing things into Unreal is relatively easy. Just have the editor open, your Windows Explorer, and drag it where you want to be. In our case, we'll drag it into textures, and done. There's a small asterisk near it. That means you have to save the asset, because if you don't save it and exit the editor, the asset is just gonna disappear. Now that we've imported our tileset texture, let's double click it to have a good look at it. So on the surface this looks fine, everything seems in order, but if you're using pixel art, you might notice that it's not pixelated, like everything is filtered and smoothed out, and this is not something that we want if you're using pixel art. If you're not using pixel art, then this should be fine and you don't need to make any changes. But if you're using pixel art, right click the Pixel 2D tileset combined, and at sprite action, press apply paper to the texture settings. Basically this just changes the filtering of the image so it doesn't smooth out the hard pixels, and you can see now it looks much better. Everything's pixelated, everything has a hard edge, and now we hit save. Let's move on to creating a tileset and a tilemap. What's a tileset? Basically, it's a collection of tiles pulled from a texture, and the tilemap is a 2D grid with a defined width and height in tiles where you can paint your tiles onto. So as an analogy, think of the tileset as your colors and the tilemap as your canvas on which you paint with your colors. So to do that, just right click our texture again, and in sprite action just press create tileset, and it's gonna create a tileset for you. Now for readability, let's move it into the tilemaps folder, and you do that by click and dragging it to the tilemaps, and you'll have a couple of options, but just use move here. Now that it's done, we can open up the tileset. So as you can see, it's pretty much almost identical to the tilemap, but we have a few different windows and options here. Let's go through some of them really quickly, and we'll go through some of the others as we need them a bit later on. So this is our tileset view, and here we can view the entire tileset, and we can actually click on the different tiles, and it's gonna show us the selected tile in the single tile editor plus a few options. Now when you create the tileset, the first big part is to define its tile size, and basically that means how many pixels is it wide and how many pixels is it tall. In our case, even though some of these might look 32 by 32, our tile size is 16 by 16, so let's change it now. And as you can see, when we change it, our selection square changes as well. Great. Now let's save this and exit. And now let's create a tile map. Creating a tile map is easy as well. You right click the tile set, not the texture, and at the tile set actions you have create tile map. Just create the tile map and just save it, demo tile map. Save it and double click to open it. This is our tile map editor. It might not be as complex as some bespoke tile maps editor like Tiled, but I feel it's good enough, at least for my needs. So let's get started, shall we? You can see it's separated into 3 different parts. The first one is the tile set. Basically, this is where we'll sample our brushes from. This is the actual canvas, and these are the details. So to start out, let's configure out our tile set a bit. So in the setup here, it says map width and map height. This is in tile, so, and the tile width and tile height is basically the size in pixels of our tile. So since we wanted this to be a 16 by 16 tile set, we leave this as it is at 16 by 16. As for the map width, 4 by 4 is a bit small, as you can see. Let's increase it to something like 40 by 20. So now you can zoom out and right click to move, and now we can see it's a pretty decent size. Another important option in the setup that you might find useful is the projection mode. Now it's orthogonal, which is perfect for platforming games and actually most other games that we'll be working on, but you can change it to isometric if you want. That's gonna allow you to make an isometric game similar to Diablo and other games of the genre, or you can change it to isometric staggered or hexagonal if you want. We're not gonna go into too much detail about those, we'll stick with orthogonal. So now comes the most important part, arguably. How do we paint? Painting is actually pretty easy. With your paint selected here, you can select it by clicking it or pressing B on the keyboard, and you just go to the tile set, and you can zoom out using the scroll wheel and navigate using the right mouse button, and just select a tile that you want to add. Let's say I select this, and now I can paint using this. I can hold the mouse button and paint like this. So this is the basics of painting. Now let's say you want to erase, like I did. Just press the eraser button or press the E key and just erase. Unfortunately, you can't really erase multiple tiles right now, so it's a bit of a pain having to erase all of this manually, but I don't find myself erasing stuff all that much personally. So what if you want to paint more than just one tile? Well, you can do that by pressing the left click and dragging your mouse button, and you can select multiple tiles and paint like that directly. As you can see, this is really useful as you can quickly switch between boom and like have them like this. Now again, you can Ctrl Z to undo or erase them manually. Let's say I want to make a small platforming section, so I'd like to select this entire chunk to get a nice platform started, and then I can select this part only to get a bit of length and just do it like this. And I want to end this platform, and so I'm gonna search for the end here. Is it like this? This isn't actually the length of this, so we can just use this, or if you prefer, use this, so you have a bit of variation. That's pretty cool. Let's save the map now, and let's actually test it out, shall we? Now to do that, after you save the tile map, you can close it and then just drag and drop it into your viewport. This should be good enough. I'm just gonna move it here on the as close to 0 as possible. We'll leave it as the 310. And how do we test it out? Well, actually the simplest way is to just drop a character, a player here, and test it out. Now I said we're not gonna use the place actors tab too much, and this is true, but in this case we have a really nice pre-made actor called player start. Basically you drag and drop this anywhere in your level. Now this will use the information stored in your game mode to spawn a character. In our case it's gonna spawn the same character you have in the demo, but if you're wondering what the game mode is, it's basically a place where you store logic. If you store logic inside your levels, for example, it's only gonna apply to that level. But if you want to have some game-wide logic like win conditions or number of players or how you transitions between levels or loss conditions and so on, you usually store them in a game mode which is shared across the game. We'll get into more details about game modes later, but for now just dragging and dropping the player start here should spawn the player that we need. And now we just press play and oops, well, we fell right through the level. Now why did that happen? That happened because we don't have any collisions to these tiles, so naturally our player is just gonna fall through them. Let's add some collision right now. Now you don't actually add collisions in the tile map, you add them in the tile set. So double click your tile set, open it up, and let's add some collisions. Collisions are stored on a tile by tile basis, so we have a huge amount of flexibility on which tiles we want to have collisions or not. So the simplest way to do this is to press this, and this is gonna show your colliding tiles, and as you can see we don't have any right now. Let's add some. We'll go over here to one of our tiles, and since we added this, we'd like this part to have collision and this part as well, but we don't really want this part to have collision since we don't need it, and we'd like to be able to walk through this if it's a foreground object, right? Great. So in order to add a collision, just click the tile that you want, and you have a few different options, and we're just gonna use add box since that's the simplest. This adds a box around the bounds of the tile, and you can leave it as it is, or you can select the different points of that box and move them around, and as you can just move them around. You can make it larger, smaller, and edit it to the size that you want. So we're just gonna do this for all the tiles that we want to collide. It's a pretty manual process, but you only need to do it once, and after that you're good to go. Great. That's all good if you have a square tile, but what if you have like a non-standard tile size like this? It's a good question. You have a couple of options. The first one will be add polygon, and you just press here and you can add different points inside the polygon and then press enter, and you can edit it here and change it and customize it. But personally I still use the square, like add box, and then just take this, move it like this. Same here, box, move it like this, and so on. You can choose any approach that you want. I'm just showing you the one that I personally prefer. So now that we have these tiles colliding, let's save them, and now press refresh maps. Basically this refreshes the tile maps that use this tile set, so the new collision apply. Refresh maps, save this, and then double click and open the map and save this as well. And now if everything's gone right, it should work. There you go. Now we have colliding tiles, and we can walk right on top of this tile set, so that's really good. Now this is all well and good, but it's a bit barren, isn't it? Let's add some more details on the tile map, shall we? Go to open the tile map again, and right now I just want to fix this annoying tiling issue, and I'm just gonna use the grass from here, and there you go. Looks much better now. Okay, let's add some more details to our tile map, shall we? Let's try to add this tree, and there's a couple of ways you can do it. Like, first of all, we can add this tree, and it's gonna replace the tiles that it overrides. So for example, if I add it here, it's gonna overwrite these tiles, because if you add a tile on top of an existing tile and it's on the same layer, it's just gonna overwrite it. So how do we make them not overwrite them? Not overwrite each other? We use different layers for that, and as you can see in the tile map we have a layer list, and for now we only have one layer created. Let's click to rename it and call it our base layer, and let's add a couple of more layers. Let's add one new layer and call it background, and another new layer and call it foreground. And now basically the layer hierarchy determines how, if a layer is below, in front, or behind the other. So the lowest layer in the hierarchy is the one that's most further back, and the top layer is the ones that's closer to the camera. So in this case, you want to take the background layer and just press the send backward button, so it's in the behind. So we have our base layer. Our background layer should be behind our base layer, as you can see now. See, if I add it here, it's just gonna be added behind it. It's not gonna replace them anymore. And now if I add another tree, it's just gonna override the one behind it only, as you can see. But let's just add a tree here, and let's add another tree in the foreground. Let's add it here, for example. So this goes in front of the foreground. So our intention here should be technically for the player to be in front of this tree and behind this tree. Let's test it out and see how it goes. If you hit play, okay, the player is in front of this tree as we want, but unfortunately it's not behind this tree. And why is that? This is because that even though we're working on a 2D orthographic view and we're using 2D assets, Unreal is a 3D engine, so it does store assets in a 3D world, and we can clearly see this if we go to our viewport and show perspective. And now we can, if we walk around here, we can clearly see that there's a difference between these two layers. So you can see that the background layer is a bit behind the main layer, and the foreground layer is just a bit in front here. And we can actually control how large the distance between layers is by going back to the tile map and using the separation per layer. So currently it's set to 4, that's 4 units, like Unreal Engine units, and for clarity's sake let's set it to 100 and save it. And now it's really clear, the separation between these layers. One thing that Unreal Engine does is use the coordinates for the topmost layers as the coordinates for the tile map. So if you have it on 0, 0 on the axis, it's gonna use these coordinates for the topmost tile map. So in this case, since our y coordinates is the same with our player y coordinates, then this is gonna be at the same y on the same y value as the topmost layers, which is gonna make it pretty much impossible for it to be on the foreground. To do this, you can either move the terrain so the layer you want is at 0. In our case, since we've added a separation of 100 units, we can move it to 100. So in this case, the play y coordinates will be at the same as the y coordinates for this layer that we want to walk on. Let's change it back to, instead of 100, to something like 10. That's what I use. I think it's a pretty good middle ground. And instead of 100, we're just gonna put it to 10. And now theoretically, it should work. Our player should be in front of the background layer, walk on top of the mid layer, and be behind of the foreground layer. So yep, this is all working perfectly. Now let's talk a bit more about collision, shall we? Similar to how layers are spread around the y-axis inside Unreal Engine, collisions are 3D as well. In order to see collisions, we can go here on this button and check enable collision, or press Alt-C, and now you can see the collisions for pixels that are colliding. As you can see, they're pretty simple collision boxes, so nothing too fancy, and only the tiles that we've added collision to are colliding. And they have a certain thickness, as you can see, and there are ways to edit this thickness. If we go here inside the tile map, you can see at collision thickness it's set to 50. That's Unreal units. Usually, just to be sure and to eliminate any potential issues with the player or the enemies falling through the collision, I like to set it at 150 or so. So collision goes on pretty much wherever you need. So the chances of your player going too far forward or backward on the y-axis and falling through the tiles is minimal. So, and you can have them as long as you want. You can set them to 1000 if you want, but I don't really recommend that. Or you can set it to a really low value, but that's gonna make a couple of issues possibly pop out in the near future, especially if you have a lot of like physics interactions. And even though you can lock the physics onto axis, sometimes bugs do happen and your objects might be propelled a bit forward or backward on the y-axis, and it's just gonna cause them to fall through the collision. So that's why I put it to 150, and with this value I've never had any issues with falling through the collision. So, and now we can just go here and uncheck the collisions if we want to. So hopefully this has been an interesting episode. It's a bit more specific to our game, and we've made a new level. We found out how tilesets and tilemaps work, and in the next video we'll continue adding to this level, and we'll find out how animated tilesets work, how you can replace a tile with an animated flip book, and how we can make a couple of cool effects with that. So stick around for more. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you.